Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to Since Day One. Before we get into this update video today about R.Kelly as well as Sparkle, and last but not least, we have Sparkle's niece Rashona. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, and if you are new, smash that subscribe button to take flight with us.
Fake love, I don't need it, you can keep it, that's a fact. I had to make up my mind. I took that weight on my shoulder. I done been down for
So this is the day everybody has been waiting on, you guys, to hear Sparkle's niece finally tell on R.Kelly, to finally speak her side of the story and let everybody know what really happened. Because it seems like when Stephanie, aka Sparkle, came out and let everybody know what was really going on, that she kept some things secret herself. Since watching Surviving R.Kelly, it seemed like everyone had a side eye at Sparkle. Like, was you really having a relationship with R.Kelly, or is you really advocating for your niece? I mean, don't get me wrong, because right is right and wrong is wrong. I don't believe R.Kelly is innocent at all, and this is not me saying to free R.Kelly. He needs to stay exactly where he is at, and my opinion on that is not going to change. However, paying attention to the Chicago trial that R.Kelly is currently going through and hearing Stephanie, aka Sparkle's niece's testimony on the stand, just really got me looking some type of way at Sparkle. And one thing I wanted to say before we get into what happened in court today, you guys, is when federal prosecutors gave immunity to Sparkle's niece and her parents, did they extend immunity to Sparkle as well? Because if not, I wouldn't put it past law enforcement to be bringing charges against her pretty soon. If you guys have not watched my last video, then please go do so, because that video is basically explaining the opening statements between prosecution and the defense. They called a couple of witnesses yesterday, and one of those witnesses included a detective who received the infamous videotape of R.Kelly and Sparkle's niece from Jim Goddaughter, who was covering this story back in the early 2000s. When court was adjourned yesterday, Detective Everett was on the stand at the time, and he was getting ready to get cross-examined. However, it was too late in the day, and they said that he would begin to get cross-examined today. So I just wanted to update you guys on that part, because we're going to start right where we left off yesterday. So again, and I'm sorry to repeat myself, if you have not watched the video I uploaded yesterday about the opening statements, then please feel free to go watch that one before you watch this one so that you could be caught up. So it starts off saying a retired detective who allegedly saw one of R.Kelly's tapes is currently in cross-examination. Defense points out he saw a VHS tape some 20 years ago, but was shown a disc yesterday. Detective said he can't be sure the disc and the VHS tape are exactly the same. David's attorney, Beau Brindley, is cross-examining retired Chicago Police Department Detective Daniel Everett, hinting heavily toward chain of custody issues for the tape at the center of R.Kelly's 2002 case. Detective Everett recently reviewed a copy of that video, which is also a part of this federal indictment, and has testified that the content was the same, but acknowledges he has not seen the original tape in years and does not know where it is. On cross-examination from R.Kelly's attorney, Jennifer Bonjean, Detective Everett says he also interviewed one of Jane's friends, who is expected to testify later at trial under the name Pinky. Pinky did not tell Detective Everett that she had any type of relations or contact with R.Kelly, according to Everett's report from 2002. R.Kelly's lead defense attorney, Jennifer Bonjean, asking the retired Chicago detective about a report he made in 2000 regarding a DCFS complaint he allegedly received regarding the parents of Kelly's alleged victim, Jane. And if you guys do not know by now, Jane is Sparkle's niece in this instance. So every time you hear me say Jane, I'm referring to Sparkle's niece. R.Kelly's attorney continued, this DCFS complaint lodged against Susan and Brandon complained that they were allowing their daughter Jane to sleep with the 33-year-old man, Bonjean said. The detective tells Jennifer Bonjean that after interviewing all of them, he concluded the allegation was unfounded. And I'm guessing in this instance, Susan and Brandon would be Jane's parents. However, detective also tells Bonjean that while investigating the DCFS allegation against Jane's parents, he only conducted a single half-hour interview with them. Further says he never interviewed R.Kelly himself on the matter. Bonjean is now questioning the detective regarding his investigation into Pinky, another of R.Kelly's alleged victims and a friend of Jane. Pinky herself is expected to testify at some point in the trial. Bonjean pressing the Chicago detective Daniel Everett on why he did not investigate Pinky more thoroughly. You'd think if she told you she was having relations with an adult as an underage person, you would have opened an investigation, Bonjean says. Detective Everett is now off the stand. Prosecution now calls Matthew Hulsizer, an Illinois resident who says he works self-employed in the technology and finance industry, to the stand. Hulsizer owned a property formerly owned by R.Kelly in Chicago at 1010 West George Street. And if you guys don't remember which house that was, it was this house that appeared on Surviving R.Kelly, by the way. Prosecution asked Hulsizer, did Chicago police come to your home at 1010 West George Street in 2002 and asked to take photos? Yes, he says. R.Kelly was indicted on multiple charges in 2002, some of which allegedly occurred in the home's Colorado room. And if you guys don't remember, here's a flashback to the Colorado room. Prosecution continued to ask Hulsizer about the house at 1010 West George Street in Chicago, a property formerly owned by R.Kelly in the 90s, which Hulsizer himself owned in 2002 while R.Kelly was under investigation for his infamous videotape charges. Hulsizer says when he moved into R.Kelly's former Chicago home, the smoke detectors in the main bedroom were not actually smoke detectors, they were disguised video cameras. Hulsizer further says that after he moved into R.Kelly's former home at 1010 West George Street in Chicago, he never allowed R.Kelly back into the property. And with that being said, prosecutor wraps up its questions and allows defense to begin cross-examination. Hulsizer didn't forget to mention that he also found that you had to press a button to get out of the bedroom, a feature he removed since he thought it was a safety hazard. R.Kelly's defense attorney, Jennifer Bonjean, again coming back to the smoke detector disguised video camera, Hulsizer says he did not confirm whether the video camera was operable or if there were any images stored on it before he disposed of it. And with that being said, R.Kelly's defense wraps up its questions for Hulsizer. Prosecution has no follow-up, so he is dismissed. Court is taking a 15-minute break. The next witness to be called to the stand in R.Kelly's federal trial in Chicago will be Jane, aka Sparkle's niece, the woman who allegedly appeared in 4 tapes R.Kelly made in 1998 when he was 31 and she was 14. Jane says that she was born in 1984, is currently 37, and was raised in the Chicago suburbs of Oak Park. Jane says that she was in a Christian hip-hop group. Her mother and deceased father were also musicians, she says. One of the prosecution's claims against R.Kelly is that R.Kelly took advantage of Jane's music career ambitions for certain favors. Jane began describing her time with her hip-hop group in the 90s. It was an amazing time. We were very successful. I was living my dream. I was very happy while touring with the group, Jane says. She was homeschooled. Jane went on to say that she is familiar with R.Kelly, whom she knew of through his R&B music and first met in 1996 when she was 12 or 13. He came to a gospel concert at my church. I was excited. I knew his level of success, and I was excited like any other fan, Jane said. Jane went on to say that it was her aunt, Sparkle, who first introduced her to R.Kelly after the gospel concert. They met backstage and later met again a few months later when R.Kelly came to a performance put on by Jane's music group. R.Kelly told me I did a great job. He gave me pointers on how to handle the stage. It made me feel accomplished that a successful person was saying I was gifted, Jane says. Following this meeting with R.Kelly at her music group's Chicago performance, Jane says she started seeing R.Kelly more through her aunt Stephanie, aka Sparkle, who Jane says had a romantic relationship with Kelly at the time. And that's all I'm saying right there, y'all, because how many interviews Sparkle did since Surviving R.Kelly? She went on Surviving R.Kelly like she was the auntie advocating for her niece, like her niece was stuck in some type of situation that she couldn't get her out of, that her parents didn't care, that Sparkle was the only one who cared. And I'm just trying to understand, girl, why was you holding things from us? Why was you withholding information? Why was you only wanting to tell us certain things but not the whole story? And y'all remember way back in the way back past when Sparkle's husband, her ex-husband, who was a part of the public announcement group, came out and said that Sparkle had left him for R.Kelly. And Sparkle was out and about doing interviews, debunking the lies, talking about she ain't never had no relationship with R.Kelly. Girl, and your own niece then got on the stand and told on you. Said that you was having a relationship with R.Kelly. See, now, we could have been on your side advocating for you if you would have told us the truth back then, but now, girl, we can't help help you. It's becoming a little clearer how you lost your musical career, girl, because you know what? I ain't even gonna get too far ahead of myself. I'm just gonna continue reading these tweets, and we gonna put two and two together ourselves while we making it make sense for ourselves. Sparkle's niece continued that she visited R.Kelly at his Chicago track studio at 865 North Larrabee Street in Chicago hundreds of times in the late 90s. Prosecution is now going over some boilerplate questions to establish that Jane knew R.Kelly very well. They're asking her what his studio looked like, how he wore his hair, and his album cover art, etc. Jane is now going through and identifying pictures of R.Kelly's studio, which she says she first began visiting with her auntie Stephanie Sparkle Edwards in 1996 or 1997. Jane would have been 12 or 13 years old at this point. And y'all, listen to this shiznit. Jane says her aunt pushed her to get closer to R.Kelly. Jane said that her auntie Sparkle said, I should ask R.Kelly to be my godfather, that I should rub his head and ask him to take that role in my life, Jane says. R.Kelly chuckled and said yes. Her parents, she says, also approved. Lock them all up. After that, the nature of their relationship changed, Jane said. We would spend a lot of time on the phone together, and eventually he might ask me a question like, what color panties are you wearing? She was 13 years old at the time. On the cool, y'all, I really feel like Sparkle knew what she was doing. She felt like that she can get some type of clout from the situation while she was messing with R.Kelly. She kind of knew what his weaknesses were, and you gonna bring your niece around this man. I mean, I can understand if you was bringing your niece around him to help further her career with her little music group or whatever. But I really feel like at this point, Sparkle had ulterior motives. She had some undercover intentions, and she was probably trying to get R.Kelly set up so she could get some money out of him, and she wasn't expecting for him to stop messing around with her and start messing around with her niece. Which probably made Stephanie really bitter. And I don't even mean to be one of them people. Like I told y'all, I don't support R.Kelly, but I just feel like that she had to have some type of bitterness going on inside of her, that you lost your record deal, you lost your musical career, and this man is having relations with your niece. That would eat me alive. Knowing that I done messed around and lost my husband for this man. I done lost everything, and now my family ain't messing with me either. But now I see why, because girl, you was the one who introduced your niece to him in the first place. Well, moving along, Jane says R.Kelly also began asking her about her breast developing and other issues, and that eventually their relationship progressed to having phone relations, she said. She said that R.Kelly would tell her over the phone that he was jerking off. Jane went on to say that her relationship with R.Kelly became physical in 1998 when she was 14, while they were both alone on the couch in the Chicago track studio one night. Jane says R.Kelly began rubbing on her breast and on her private areas. Jane says that her parents felt quote-unquote comfortable enough with R.Kelly at the time of their first relations encounter that they didn't mind her spending time alone with him. Jane continued by saying, usually I would go to R.Kelly's basketball gym and it would be like a weekend thing, Jane said, describing how she and R.Kelly would coordinate relations while she was still underage. Jane said that sometimes her parents would take her to R.Kelly's home in Chicago as they thought of it as her spending the weekend at my godfather's house. Jane says that she had relations with R.Kelly an uncountable amount of times before she turned 18, though estimates it as hundreds. Jane went on to say that R.Kelly gave her alcohol for the first time when she was 14, and she would drink heavily, she said. It would help me loosen up, kind of take me away from the moment. Jane also alleges R.Kelly encouraged her to bring her other teenage female friends into their relationship. Specifically, Jane says R.Kelly crushed on two other alleged victims in this case, Jane's friends, Pinky and Brittany. Jane says she was between 14 and 16 when she began to have relations with Pinky and R.Kelly together. However, she says they stopped after Jane found out R.Kelly was seeing Pinky outside of their mutual encounters. Jane says she broke her friendship with Pinky over this. Likewise, Jane says she had multiple encounters with Brittany and R.Kelly together as well, and when both girls were under 18. As with Pinky, Jane says she broke off her friendship with Brittany when she found Brittany had a relationship with R.Kelly that excluded her. And that right there, you guys, concludes the current round of the prosecution's questions for Jane and R.Kelly's federal trial in Chicago court, taking a lunch break until 2 o'clock. We are back from a lunch break in the R.Kelly trial ready to resume with more testimony from Jane, who is expected to identify herself on the now infamous videotape with R.Kelly, which she denied was her back in 2002. When Jane was asked why she had relations with R.Kelly, she says it was out of intimidation. He was an authoritative figure. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to say no. I just went along with things and it somewhat became normal. Jane went on to say that she started to have feelings for R.Kelly, so she went along with his request to include her friends. I was thinking I was in love at the time and I was being submissive. I wanted to give him what he wanted and I didn't want to make him feel like I wasn't cooperative. Jane went on to say that she told no one about her relationship with R.Kelly because he told her as soon as they started having relations to keep it a secret and not to share it with anyone. She was 14 at the time, she said. She wanted to share it with her friends, but she didn't. They asked Jane, did Mr. Kelly ever record you two engaged in relations? She said yes. They asked, when did it start? She said when I was 14. Jane is now going to testify about 3 recordings that will be played for the jury of her and R.Kelly allegedly having relations at his George Street house in his bedroom and living room. Jane went on to say that she's already watched the videos in preparation for her testimony. They asked her, did you watch them from beginning to end? She says yes. They asked, did you watch them with sound? She said yes, softly. They asked, who is depicted in these videos? She says, Robert and myself. The tapes are being admitted now. Jane went on to tell jurors the second video in R.Kelly's living room shows her laying on the floor while R.Kelly gives her oral relations. He gives her champagne, telling her to refer to her genitalia as 14 years old. And then he gave her golden showers on her private area, she says, almost too softly to hear. Jane's voice is getting quieter and starting to break as she describes the third video, which is the one from the 2008 trial that took place in the Colorado room in R.Kelly's basement. When they asked her if it was a true depiction of what happened that day, Jane whispered yes. Jane is then asked why R.Kelly appears to hand her money at the beginning of the video. She starts to cry audibly and says after a long pause, because if anybody saw the tape or if it was released for some reason, he would say I was a prostitute. Jane tells prosecutors her relationship with R.Kelly became somewhat normal due to her viewing him as an adult authority figure and due to her genuine affection. He told me he loved me and that he would protect me. It made me feel good, Jane says. The prosecutors asked Jane, why were you willing to do those things? Jane responds, again, I was in love with R.Kelly and I was submissive, so I went along with it. Well, y'all, I guess I didn't forgot to screenshot the part where they were saying that Jane has said that R.Kelly purchased a PT Cruiser for her 16th birthday. And that she had told her friends about her new car and said that her godfather had bought it for her and that she wanted to take them on a ride. The stipulation, Jane says, R.Kelly put on the new car he allegedly bought for her, she wasn't allowed to have any other boys in the car. Jane continued by confirming that R.Kelly began videotaping her engaging in certain acts with him from the time she was 14. I felt uncomfortable, she says, but adds she went along with it because he was an authoritative figure over me and I didn't feel comfortable saying no. If Jane confirms it's her on the 4 tapes at the center of this case, it will be a reversal of her testimony before an Illinois grand jury in 2002. At that time, when R.Kelly faced 21 counts in Illinois state court of creating infamous videotapes with underage girls, Jane denied it was her in the videos at the time in 2002. Jane went on to say that she thought that she was giving R.Kelly something that he wanted in making the tapes. This was a relationship and these are normal things that happen, Jane said, answering prosecutors as to why she agreed to be videotaped if she felt uncomfortable. Jane went on to say that she recognizes the disc the alleged tape is on due to recognizing her initials and the date on the disc. And if that's the original disc with her initials on it and the date, y'all, this had to be sometime around 1997 because that's when DVDs came out. Prosecution started to ask Jane where R.Kelly stored the tapes featuring her. She says they were kept in a gym bag or in the log cabin area of the basement of R.Kelly's house. I'm thinking, y'all, the Colorado room. Jane says R.Kelly stored the tapes in these places after they were done recording. Jane is now implicating Milton June Brown, R.Kelly's former personal assistant and his co-defendant in this federal case, in handling the tapes. And now Jane is discussing the DCFS investigation into her alleged relationship with R.Kelly. She's saying that she denied it because she was afraid that something bad would happen to Robert if anyone found out about the nature of our relationship. She tells prosecution her denial was false. The Chicago police questioned Jane about her relationship with R.Kelly in 2000. She says she denied any involvement with him. That was something I was going to take to my grave. I was protecting him, she says, adding, I didn't want my parents to find out either. Jane then went on to say that she found out from her aunt Stephanie, aka Sparkle, in 2001 that a tape featuring her and R.Kelly had leaked publicly. She said her parents asked her about the tape, but that of course she denied everything. Jane went on to say that R.Kelly repeatedly told her not to talk about the tape, that he seemed afraid as well. Jane said R.Kelly explained a game plan to her and her parents about the tape at a meeting at a hotel in the Chicago suburb of Oak Park. She says the meeting was set up by R.Kelly's former manager and current co-defendant, Daryl McDavid. This meeting occurred in early 2002, Jane said. I just remember my dad storming out and being upset. He was crying and he was upset, and R.Kelly was begging his forgiveness. She said her dad responded to R.Kelly by saying, I can't help you. Shortly after this meeting, Jane says she and her parents left for the Bahamas at R.Kelly's suggestion. Jane said there was a lot of negative attention happening around the videotape, and Robert wanted us to leave the country, not to have any attention on us. Jane also went on to say that R.Kelly didn't want the family to be accessible to law enforcement or the press at the time, and it was not a fun vacation, she says. The journalist covering this story said that he is not sure if R.Kelly's defense team or those of his co-defendants will have a chance to question Jane before a court lets out today at 5 p.m. I expect Jane will be on the stand well into Friday, perhaps even into next week. And now that court has resumed since the afternoon lunch, they say that Jane says that while they were on their trip, her parents came to the conclusion they were going to do as Jane asked and basically stay on R.Kelly's side. She said that her parents had lost their jobs and couldn't afford lawyers, and that they didn't want to lose Jane too. Jane says that while she was in Mexico, she got a tattoo with R.Kelly's name and with a heart. When she got back and she showed it to R.Kelly, he told her that it was a problem, and he had his assistant Milton Brown take her to a tattoo artist's house to get it covered up. Jane says that after she was subpoenaed to testify before a Cook County grand jury in April 2002, R.Kelly again told her to stay loyal and denied that it was her on the tape. She says R.Kelly paid for an attorney to go with her to the appearance. Jane went on to say that she was put under oath before the grand jury. They questioned her and asked, were you truthful? She says no. Then they asked her, what did you tell them that was not true? She says that I was not involved with R.Kelly relationship-wise and that we had never made any videotape. Jane also acknowledges to the court that in exchange for her testimony today, she has been granted immunity from prosecution for perjury for lying on stand in 2002. Jane also went on to say that she turned over 2 key pieces of evidence to R.Kelly's lawyers at the time. A silver cross necklace that was visible on the tape, as well as her passport, which had a photo of her wearing the same necklace. The lawyers were Ed Jensen, and I believe there was a Sam Adam Jr. Jane testifies she moved to R.Kelly's mansion in Olympia Fields while his case was pending. But after he was acquitted, their relationship changed for the worse. As far as other women being involved and as far as abuse coming into play, R.Kelly's lawyer objects, and now they are in a sidebar. And y'all, I ain't even gonna lie. This whole entire time that Jane, aka Sparkle's niece, has been on the stand talking about R.Kelly, it's just really been making me think, where has Drea Kelly been the entire time? Because now they're talking about this house that R.Kelly had in Olympia Fields, but didn't Drea stay with him as well? If she was calling R.Kelly her godfather, then I want to know where her godmother was. If you was married to this man from 1996, I just got questions. Like, it just makes me wonder, where were you at for hundreds of times while he was doing this stuff with Jane? Well, moving along, Jane testifies R.Kelly hurt her from the age of 17 to the time she left him at 24. It involved being spanked and hitting, she said. She also says he controlled her, would not allow her to work or leave. But in 2014, Jane said R.Kelly helped her rent her own place in University Park and to get a car to go to work. He paid for it in part with a check that says settlement on it. They asked her, did you have any kind of settlement agreement with R.Kelly? She says no. Jane went on to say that she finally started coming clean about her relationship with R.Kelly to law enforcement a few years ago. When asked why, she paused for several seconds and said it was because I became exhausted with living with his lies. And y'all, that was it for Jane's direct testimony. McDavid's lawyer, Bew Brindley, is starting his cross now. Sounds like Jennifer Bonjean will cross-examine Jane on Friday. McDavid's attorney, Bew Brindley's cross was brief, and we are now adjourned for the day. Woo! Y'all need to make that a martini double.
So long, sleeping from sofa to sofa. Now I'ma step on these little bitty bitches. Here's some brand new Gucci low, some Gucci walking. I got tired of eating Big Mama's chicken. Now it's business when I walk.